guys, so I know it doesn't come to a surprise that obviously mine would be on baseball. So I just want to give you guys a background on the 1940s, 1950s. I thought this was the most pivotal decade in all of baseball because there are so many great things that happened during this era. Throughout the whole semester, I wanted to start everybody off with the beginning of baseball and work my way through decades, the most important points, all the way up to the present. And so yeah, I picked the 1940s, 1950s because I thought this was really pivotal and one of the big things that people should learn in my class. So I just want to start out with asking someone a question. Do we all know what was going on in the 1940s when when this decade was going on? Any volunteers to tell us what was going on? Of course.
World War II.
Okay. And at the start of this decade, were we involved in it? Okay. That's where I want to start out with my first point, or slide. So going into the 1940s, in the beginning, right here I put up a picture of Hitler's troops, of course. And in the beginning of the 1940s, we weren't involved in the war yet. We wanted to build on this idea of isolationism and stay out of conflicts. So while American people were fixated on the game of baseball because it was known as America's favorite pastime, Hitler was rising and taking over control of Europe, as you can see right here. I want to talk about Ted Williams during this decade. He was one of the greatest baseball players of all time. During this era, in 1940, he became the only player to hit 400, which in baseball, that's one of the greatest accomplishments ever. If you look at a game statistically and grades-wise, 3 out of 10 on a test in Dr. Kim's class would be terrible. You'd be getting an F, but in the game of baseball, you'd be succeeding. You'd be a Hall of Famer. So to imagine that Ted Williams was successful 4 out of 10 at-bats was just amazing, and he would be the only baseball player to ever do that feat for 162 games, which is incredible. So I just wanted to talk about him and how important he was. And then just going into like Pearl Harbor kickstarted us going into the war. That would make baseball never the same again. So right here is Ted Williams, like I talked about before, one of the greatest baseball players of all time. He's being sworn into the Navy right here. So he gave up on his professional career, just like many other baseball players did at the time, because the draft, they obviously took him, other people volunteered. So, like I said, the draft begins, all these people are going over to play. One of my stats that I talked about is not only American baseball players were involved in this, but you have to think about Japanese baseball players that had a huge baseball league at the time. My stats say that 150 baseball players that were Japanese baseball players died during this conflict. So it's kind of cool to see that it wasn't just about the United States and their baseball players, but as well as Japanese baseball players. And the cause of the World War caused the Major League Baseball to close down, so there was no baseball at the time of the early 1940s, and you have this sense of baseball becoming this forgotten pastime that it used to be something that we loved, but we were so much more focused on the war at the time. So my next point, I want to talk about how women pretty much stepped up during this time. There were no men, all men that were of age were fighting in the war. Anyone younger was too young to play a professional sport anyways. And like I said before, women stepped up big during this time. Like we have Rosie the Riveter right here, just like one of the most iconic signs during this era because the women began to take on the roles of men and what they did. So they kind of stepped in and played baseball, which was cool because they gave everyone a chance to relax and not think about the war, while the people got to go watch them enjoy what was going on in America and try to forget about what was going on overseas. Kind of like how they used movies during this time. It kind of gave people this chance, maybe 2 hours, 2.5 hours, to like forget about all the worries and family members and stuff like that across seas, and just focus on the game of baseball. And the AAGPL or GPBL is the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, and this was founded in 1943 by Philip K. Wrigley. I don't know if any of you know or much about baseball, but the Chicago Cubs just won the World Series this year, and they have one of the most iconic baseball stadiums in the world, which is Wrigley Field, and it was named after Wrigley, who I just mentioned before because he was so pivotal in stuff he did and stuff like that. Midwestern U.S. cities are where pretty much most of these games were taking place. You had Iowa, Kansas, I want to say Nebraska. Like these Midwestern cities, states, all joined together, and that's pretty much where the games took place. So they would travel back and forth. And the development of women's baseball, it started out as softball, and after the first couple of years, they transitioned to where they made it more like baseball, and people seemed to enjoy that more. It was more intense, more fun to watch these women actually do what men did. So the development of women's baseball was huge, and it probably kept it around longer than what it could have been if it was just softball. Right here is a picture of a woman on the Rockford Peaches. They're one of the most well-known women's baseball teams of all time. If you guys have ever seen A League of Your Own, it's about women's baseball, and it's really good. I suggest you guys watch that if you ever have any free time. It's awesome. Started out with 4 teams in 1943. In 1948 was like their peak season. They had 10 teams. It was really intense. So many good things going on during that. Like I mentioned before, how she played for the Rockford Peaches, they won the most championships during their 12 years. The league ran from 1943 to 1954, and they won 4 of those 12 years, so that's pretty iconic. And then we see after the war's over, men are starting to come back, baseball is starting to pick up, and you get this decline in attendance in 1950, and that's kind of what drove American women's baseball off into the decline. Like I was mentioning before, we're talking about after World War II. Here we have Ted Williams again. He's flying a plane in the Navy, which I hope that's a real thing. I believe so. There are pilots in the Navy. If not, he's just posing for it. But here he is playing in front of thousands of people. Just one of the greatest players of all time. All the baseball players are coming back home. The only thing they know is baseball, so they got right back into baseball. Like I said, Ted Williams went on to play another 6 or 7 seasons after he came back and fought. And then you get this role of women changing. They get more, I wouldn't put it as respect, but they get like, they believe that, or people believe that women can do what men can do. So they get like this role where they can do men's jobs, but they kind of go back into the role of, I don't want to put it as stay-at-home moms, but they kind of go back into what they know, which was what they did before the World War. But there are also many women that went on to like do many great things in men's field work. So you get that change of role, how they get a little more respect, and they know what they can do. The next person I want to talk about is Branch Rickey. He could be one of the most famous people of baseball, but it happened so long ago, but we know more about Jackie Robinson and him rather than how Branch Rickey influenced everything that happened. We have Branch Rickey right here smoking a cigarette at a baseball game, looking on. He's a former baseball player, former manager, former executive. He was part owner of the Brooklyn Dodgers, and during the 1940s, he started this secret scouting. It was this secret, top secret thing where he was going to Negro League games, and if many of you don't know what Negro Leagues are, It's where African Americans were regulated to just playing in that. There was this color barrier, they want to call it, that no one wanted to cross. And he kind of started the whole kickstart to breaking down this color barrier. On October 23rd, 1945, this is when Jackie Robinson signed his contract with the Brooklyn Dodgers to be the first ever African American baseball player. And in some of the sources I looked up, they have Ricky's motivation and how his motivation for signing an African American player was debated over time. Just like every argument, you have people who see the good side of stuff and people who see the bad side of things. And Ricky's side was, he was a devout Christian, he hated segregation, he thought it was against the moral of Christian values to hate on another religion when everybody should be loved. In college, he was affected by segregation. He had an African American teammate who in college was one of the greatest at the time. I forget the name of him, but Branch Rickey saw how this African American baseball player in college was really good, but yet segregation was going on, and he couldn't get over the hump because there was so much racial tension and stuff going on. Some of the views on Branch Rickey were that people believed the signing of Jackie Robinson was this plantation view, that he is signing this really talented African American baseball player for less than what a white man is signing for. So if you look at it like that, he's getting the goods for a lesser value, and people try to just demolish his image with that, which that is definitely not what Branch Rickey was all about. The best thing out of the decision was that he forced other owners to not accept segregation, but at least buy into segregation or ending segregation, because if you wanted the best team, you had to get the best players. Most of the best players played in the Negro leagues. So the outcome of that was that he forced other owners to, even if they didn't like it, to jump over this color barrier and bring the good talent to the white leagues, I guess you want to call it. And this ended the color barrier after his actions right here. So next, I have a couple of Branch Rickey's quotes. Any volunteers to read this would be awesome. Caitlin, go for it.
I had to get the right man off the field. I couldn't come with a man to break down a tradition that had centered and concentrated all the prejudices of a great many people, north and south, unless he was good. I must be sure that the man was good on the field, but more dangerous to me at that time and even now was the wrong man off the field. It didn't matter to me so much in choosing a man off the field that he was temperamental, righteously subject to resentments. I wanted a man of exceptional intelligence, a man who was able to grasp and control the responsibilities of himself to his race and could carry that load. That was the greatest danger.
Thank you. This is Branch Rickey's quotes on segregation, and before he signed Jackie Robinson to his contract, he brought him in and talked to him and realized how good of a person Jackie really was, and he knew that if he just got an African American baseball player who was extremely temperamental, like with all segregation going on, he knew that the color barrier would never be broken, because he would just be getting into fights, fueling these racist people and their fight against ending segregation. So he just knew that Jackie was a good moral person and he could get through anything. And I talk about it later in my slides about how he used nonviolent acts and got through it. Would anybody like to read this next one? Okay, Brianna, thank you.
We call you an extremist if you want intervention now, which is the only morally defensible position. To advise moderation is like going to a stick-up man and saying to him, "Don't use a gun. That's violent. Why not be a pickpocket instead?" A moderate is a moral pickpocket.
Thank you. And in this quote, we talk about how crazy it was to end segregation. Branch Rickey's looked at as an extremist and a communist something. He's just trying to end what's going on in our country, and a lot of people couldn't accept it. A lot of people didn't want to accept it. They had their old values. We're trying to make some new values into this. So there were a lot of extremely hurtful comments sent Branch Rickey's way, and I like this quote because he just tells it how it is, and it's just awesome. Next person I want to talk about is Jackie Robinson. Jackie was born January 31st, 1919 in Georgia. He grew up in Pasadena and went to Pasadena Junior College for 2 years before he signed his letter of intent to play baseball at UCLA. He went on to become the first African American in the Major League. And he kind of like ended this view of African Americans just being regulated to the Negro Leagues, and he gave so many people hope and just great things to come because he ended all of this. And yeah, just some stuff while Jackie was in baseball. His first day that he started, he was April 15, 1947. He started at first base. He went on to play 10 years of baseball. He was an MVP in 1949, which is crazy because that was literally 2 years after he got into the league. It was crazy to see an African American on the field. It was crazy to see that the best player in baseball was an African American. So, just so much stuff going on in the first 2 years, and he ended up having an awesome career. He's the only person to have his jersey retired out or throughout all of baseball, meaning no one on the field can wear number 42. We have Jackie Robinson Day every year now. I think it started in 2004, I believe. And every April 15th, everyone on the field wears 42 in remembrance for Jackie. And that's just cool as like a memorabilia for who Jackie was as a person. Off the field, he was extremely involved in nonviolent acts. If you guys have seen the movie 42, it's a great movie as well. There's so many things going on. I want to say at a game in Cincinnati, there's a white baseball player. He was a starting shortstop. I forget his name. He received death threats and many things like that from many death threats from racist people, and he was a white person. And that's because he stepped on the field with Jackie Robinson. And he wanted to sit out, Jackie wanted to sit out so like he would never be harmed or anything like that. But one of the men stood up and said, "No, you're a part of our team." And so that just brought them together like that. He never acted out violently. I want to say there were times where there were riots where they were trying to kill him. And he just kept on going. He contributed to the civil rights. He kind of kickstarted that, how he could show African Americans and whites could be together and peacefully. Some of his achievements off the field were he won the Congressional Gold Medal and the Medal of Freedom, or the Presidential Medal of Freedom, so that just kind of shows what an awesome person he was off the field. He served in the Army for a couple years. He was a stepping stone for other African American athletes. Just think of African American athletes now. In baseball, in basketball, in football, he kind of started all of that just from joining a baseball team and being good at it. You have people like Barry Bonds, Willie Mays, Ken Griffey Jr., Hank Aaron, one of the greatest baseball players of all time, and he kind of kickstarted that. The last one I want to talk about during the 1940s and 50s is baseball and entertainment. The first televised MLB game was broadcasted in 1939, so that was right before this decade started. But many people didn't own TVs at the time, so it was kind of like if you were a wealthy person, you could see it. If not, you were still listening to the radio at the time. This was a huge step in baseball and entertainment. People were able to see their favorite players on TV. They wouldn't have to be there in person to see them. They wouldn't have to listen to the radio to hear about them. They got to see them. I mean, it was black and white, but still it kind of just changed the whole aspect of the game. It helped with people being able to go out to their living room, not having to pay money, and just watch it on the game, as well as this whole business and entertainment in the 1940s and 50s just skyrocketed, and now today, televised sports are $1 billion industry, and I just thought that was cool. It talks about how TVs today are so technological wise, like just far past what people used to watch baseball on in the old days, that now you can hear like on the field conversation, you can hear the sound of the bat hitting the ball. And I just thought that was cool, and how baseball kind of helped entertainment just develop over time. And yeah, I want to say that's it. Thank you.
Questions? I have a question. The baseball in 1940, 1950 definitely involved with these wars and politics, right? But how about nowadays? Is there any kind of relationship between baseball and the politics? You have any idea?
I want to say nowadays, I mean, we're not in a world war, but baseball players as well as other athletes use their status as professional athletes to kind of give their opinions out there. So they kind of work their way into politics without being in politics, if you know what I'm saying. So it's kind of cool to see now that they might just be a baseball player or a basketball player or football player, but they have a say because they're always on TV, they're always in front of cameras and stuff like that. I hope that answered your question. Yes.
You mentioned that some of Jackie's teammates accepted him.
Uh-huh.
Was that the case for all of the team?
No, it wasn't. There were some that, you have to just think about this as one of the craziest things that ever happened in the United States. I know it's just a sport, but you have an African American who's not allowed to drink at the same drinking fountain, who's not allowed to shower in the same showers, being in the same room with you, and you having to play on the field with him while other people hate him for no reason. So you already have people hating the whole team because of that. So no, there were people that did not like him, and in the movie 42, it even talks about some of the famous people that were traded because they didn't like Jackie, they wanted to be traded. So there were some that did not like him, there were some that did like him, and yeah.
Right, thank you.
Alright, thank you.